Thanks for joining us today here at D3Sports.com. I'm Patrick Coleman, the executive editor of D3 Sports. We're joined by Joe Onderko, who's been doing his job almost as long as I've been doing my job. Joe is the commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. Is it commissioner? Is it or is it executive? I just assume I use the generic commissioner, and I apologize right off the bat if I've started with the wrong title for you.
You have not. You're safe. That is my actual title, but your instinct is right. When I was hired as the first full-time executive of the PAC in 2006, I was executive director. I think it was around 2012 that they changed it to the current title.
Okay. I mean, it's mostly it's the generally understandable term, right? People understand that when someone says commissioner, they are someone in charge of a sporting organization. And that is what the President's Athletic Conference is, a conference of Division III schools in primarily Western Pennsylvania, though not exclusively. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about how the conference is growing, how the conference is changing. But I first want to talk about maybe not the biggest news of the past year in the PAC, but I want to talk about just how rabid your football fans are, because we look at places such as Geneva, places such as Westminster, Grove City, W&J, of course, and these are places where people just pack in to see football games in the President's Athletic Conference. And I think we know, or if you're old like I am, and maybe like you are, you probably remember Western Pennsylvania as a football hotbed that maybe has escaped people more recently. But tell me a little bit about what that's like for you guys.
I think you just hit the major theme. When people think of Western Pennsylvania, they think of several things, and one of the big things is it's football country. And I grew up here. I grew up 7 miles from one of our schools, from Thiel College, and I've always kind of considered this, my home conference. And one of the best explanations I've heard for why it's different is, as somebody once said, is that football is a part of family culture in Western Pennsylvania. And I think everybody can make that case to a certain degree. Certainly Texas can make that case, and sure, some other places, but it's absolutely true here. It goes back to the old stereotype of the steel mills and the coal mines and kids playing football to kind of, move themselves to education and a better life. But I think that what's really not changed has been the importance of especially high school football in the overall culture, especially family culture in this region.
So when I come back to Western Pennsylvania for the second year in a row on September 13th, and I'll be there to see, I think primarily people will probably understand Mount Union at Grove City, a very important game in the Division III football pantheon this year, but also taking advantage of there being the opportunity to get 2 games in a day and seeing Shenandoah at Geneva that night. I'm expecting to see some pretty packed stands, I assume, right?
Yeah, Geneva. Well, I mean, Mount Union and Grove City, I think, speaks for itself what that's going to be like. But I think Geneva has kind of fallen under the radar because maybe they haven't been, as successful as some of the top tier teams. But Geneva consistently is I believe one of the top 10 teams in the country when it comes to attendance.
Yeah,
they have had, and this goes back to their days in the NAIA.
Right.
Their stadium holds, about 6,000 people, and they'll fill it a couple times a year at least. And even the games they don't, it's a really good crowd. So it's Beaver County. It's the same field that Joe Namath played high school on when he was at Beaver Falls High School. I mean, it is the core of what you would consider to be Western Pennsylvania football culture. And, I think Geneva also started a tradition before they came to the PAC and really kind of influenced us over the past, decade and a half of more night games rather than day games. We've kind of trended that direction. We were very much a 1 p.m. Saturday league 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But Geneva came in 2007. They had a tradition of playing at night. And our presidents made some decisions that made it easier for schools to host home night games without too much impediment. And so I think over the years that's evolved, and we've seen crowds grow along with that, I think, along with the natural growth of our conference and the closeness of the rivalries, all those factors. But we're fortunate to have several schools that draw very, very well for their home football games.
It's interesting you described yourself with a specific game time in terms of as a conference. And I know that, conferences have these conversations. The MIAC recently decided that its last couple weeks of the year would be noon home games. And I think the MAC certainly talked about, I don't know from looking at the schedules if they decided to fully go this way, but that they would be a noon Saturday league. And not really occurred to me, frankly, that leagues could be, so prescriptive and have that as part of their identity. So I was wondering if you could maybe tell me a little bit about what you guys did to loosen the strings for that to allow Geneva and others to play night games.
Yeah, it happened right after Geneva came in, which I'd say was probably about 15 years ago. But our President's Council voted to basically give home teams unilateral control of their kickoff times between the hours of 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. for games in September and October, and then between noon and 2 p.m. for November games. That's evolved a little bit. We've now shifted that in the recent years to noon to 7. But basically what that said was if a team in September and October wanted to play a home game at 7 p.m., you couldn't tell them no as the visiting team, basically. And what has happened with that is I think we've seen that just become part of the expected culture. Now understand, Pat, we're fortunate because our footprint is small enough. Yeah. We can do that. There's a lot of conferences that you don't have everybody within 2.5 hours. So that, that's allowed us to kind of grow that to the point. And I should note too, like the November rule, that doesn't mean you can't play a night game in November. It just means if you want to, now you do have to get the approval of the visiting team coming in. And that still happens too. We'll still have night games in November, but that was really the key point. Once our presidents laid that down, and again, it's changed a little bit through the years, but that core rule has been in place for about 15 years. That's when we really started to gravitate that way and really started to grow in attendance and interest.
I know that the last time I worked in a conference office I'm looking down at my calendar. It was a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. And sometimes game times cause some bad blood. So I can see where having some of those guidelines, rules on the books certainly makes some sense. Mm-hmm. You talked about the geographic kind of compact nature of the PAC, and it's certainly, it expands out a little bit now, adding Hiram into the league, but still very close together. And a lot of schools who came over from the NAIA over the course of the last 20 plus years, mm-hmm. and have kind of maintained some of those rivalries. I wanted to ask about how does that impact your league? How does that impact how people get along with each other? Sometimes being right on top of each other like that. That's there's an old phrase my mom would say, right? Familiarity breeds contempt, that sort of thing. How does that work out for you guys?
I think in general, our geographic compactness, the footprint that we have is a huge positive for us. And I think it goes way beyond football. I mean, the obvious answer to that is every conference game, nobody's ever required to have an overnight stay. Yeah. So right then you're talking about cost containment. You're talking about, for sports other than football, you're certainly talking about missed class time. You can make later decisions when it comes to like baseball and softball rainouts as opposed to having, so all of those things work to our advantage. And to your point about familiarity breeds contempt and the NAIA schools coming in and some of the older rivalries kind of coming over to us, the way I look at the PAC as this has evolved over my career, I remember hearing about when I was a kid about the old West Penn Conference in like the 50s and 60s here, where every game was a rivalry game. That was how they viewed it. I mean, they were just, and back then, obviously, they had the state schools and the private schools more together, and that's kind of split with the state going PSAC and D2 and the privates coming to us. But that's what I've been, as far as the culture, as far as the atmosphere we want to create, we want our fans to be able to travel to road games. And they do, in fairly good numbers. Yeah. But also, we want them to feel like every single game is important, and every single game is a rivalry. Obviously, we have great rivalry games. We can talk, Westminster, Geneva, the Mercer County Cup. And, I could go on and on. But I think we've gotten away from kind of spotlighting those as a separate entity. Is it less of a rivalry game when Westminster plays Waynesburg rather than Geneva, or Geneva plays Grove City, things like that? I mean, Westminster W&J has turned into a huge rivalry over the past few years. They really didn't have any history before that when Westminster was in the NAIA. Yeah. So that's what it's kind of evolved into. And you know, I think the other thing with that has just been the parity that we've had. You know, one of the things I'm really proud of, and I mean that, you know, there was the old joke that Pete Rozelle, the old NFL commissioner, parity was his favorite word in the English language. You know, the PAC's had 5 different football champions in 8 years. You know, and what that does, I mean, most conferences will have 2 teams usually battling. Maybe they'll have a 3rd team battling. Yeah. There aren't too many that can say they've had 5 different teams win the title in that span. And Pat, what comes with that is everybody goes in the season feeling like we've got a chance to compete here. You know, we can, and the net effect is now everybody's trying to climb to get to that next level, and basically the rising water lifts all the boats, and I think that's what's happened to us. And so, no, I really think that compactness has absolutely been a big benefit for us.
You talk about Westminster Geneva, and obviously there was a little bit of noise raised that's a game that's not getting played this year, and it's been played for, you know, a good number of years over the last 133. Was it difficult to not carve out exemptions for that as you go to an unbalanced schedule, which was something that, you know, the Pac having no non-conference games in football was certainly a topic of a lot of discussion as well. Was there any talk about preserving some rivalries or trying to exempt some games out of the rotation as you figured out what your master schedule was going to be?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, we've discussed that. And at times we have done that. You know, what I would say, though, in the case of this year, you know, we had a short notice membership situation occur that caused us to have to do a schedule on very short notice. And so maybe some of the things we would like to, I mean, ideally, do we want to see those games play every year? Of course we do. But sometimes you run up against hard situations and you've got to make choices. And this was the case for this coming year. And you're right. I mean, the unbalanced schedule, that's one of the unfortunate things of it is you're not going to get those same matchups every single year. But then I think you made a good point. I mean, now you get into discussion, okay, what qualifies for that and what doesn't? And where do you draw that line? Yeah. And now I come back to my original point. If every game is a rivalry game, that's harder to do, quite frankly. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, do I want to see that game played every year? Absolutely I do. But I think folks understand that when you're dealing with as many, 11 football teams this year, and we've had, I think that started from 2014 to 17 was the first time we had 11 teams and did unbalanced back when Thomas More was in the league. Yeah. So we've done this before. When you're an odd number of teams, 11, there's no perfect answer to this. It's a question of which schedule can has the least negatives to it. Ideally, if we were 10 or 12, does that make it easier? Of course it does. But that's not how we base our membership decisions, quite frankly. So whatever it is, we take the data that we have and we try to make the best decision we can to, promote an even playing field and to promote the league.
I assume you have a 12-game or a 12-team master schedule that you're probably going to pull back out of the archive file coming up in a couple of years when St. Francis comes into the league for every sport, not just football, but we'll talk about football here just for a second because, this is a situation where then you have the opportunity, at least in Division III, that is still the case, to when you have 12 teams, you can split into 2 divisions. You can play an exempt conference championship game in week 11. So your student athletes could get the opportunity to have an 11th regular season game, which is not super common at the Division III level. When St. Francis comes in, and of course, every time these days when we say something like this, it's like assuming no other changes in a conference alignment for any of the various reasons that could happen. Is that what was on the table? Is that what you guys are looking at for? And what year is that, to be honest?
Yeah, we're looking at several options. The one thing I will say is we are committed in both this coming year and the year after, 25 and 26, to an 8-2, to 2 non-conference games. For 20, now St. Francis is going to be coming in that year, so we do have them worked into that for next year. Okay. For 27, we have a few models that we could possibly see, but I think we're kind of holding it to. Do we stay at 8-2? Do we go to 9-1? Do we split the divisions? Do we not split the divisions? I think we've seen models for all of those different possibilities. Yeah. but I think we want there. There's a few things we wanted to wait until this past year was done with some scheduling decisions because we just wanted to see how NPI was going to play out.
Sure.
And of course, we were a beneficiary of the way NPI played out this year. Is that going to be the same standard in the future? I mean, I don't think we know that at this point.
I don't think we know. I think we can assume that nothing will be constant when it comes to NPI other than the 2-year windows that they give us for how the dials are set.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, we've considered multiple formulas, multiple possibilities with that. I think we're going to kind of keep that pretty close to the vest until we kind of get a better feel of what things look like. I think, having this first year of getting back into playing non-conference, I think is going to be a challenge for us, a good challenge for us. I mean, I think our teams are playing excellent non-conference schedules,
yes.
And I think we're ready for that, quite frankly. I mean, at least based on the results we've seen the last couple of years in the postseason and some of the other things that have happened. I think all those things are on the table, but I don't think we're quite at a position of coming public. Here's what we're going to do in 27 and beyond.
To be honest with you, I will probably find out when one or more of your coaches posts on our open date board. That is how we all found out that you guys were coming back to play non-conference games this year, right?
That's usually the way it works. I can't dispute that.
I mean, that's what's most important, right? Is they have to then pound the pavement, sure. And if it's a change, if you lose a non-conference game, then a coach might have to get rid of an agreement, right? Or if you add one, then you have to find somebody who's not playing in week 3. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I'm telling you this, but not all of the viewing and listening audience understands that. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yep.
We talked about, adding opportunities for student athletes to compete, and the PAC has been in the past very active in the ECAC Bowl series, and then added along with the HCAC, the NCAC, and the OAC a new bowl series which played for the first time this past season. How did your institutions feel about how that went down this year? Obviously, Westminster with the opportunity to compete, and then other schools know that they may have an opportunity to do so as well here in the upcoming seasons.
Well, I'll start with your first point. I think the ECAC Bowls have been very good for us. I think we've had a lot of success, especially in the past 5 years, going out. And that was kind of what I was referring to in my last comment. The Opendorse Bowl series is something that really we tried to get off the ground some time ago. Just to give you a little information you may not know. I mean, Tim Gleason and I from the OAC talked about this a decade ago.
Okay.
Yeah. And we did some groundwork, and we just couldn't quite get it off the ground at that point. And I give a lot of credit to Sarah Ote, who was with the OAC but is now with the UAA. Yeah. A few years ago, when Sarah, after Tim retired and Sarah came in, I kind of updated her on the conversations we had. I said, I don't know if anything's changed from your end, but if there's any interest in kind of getting that ball rolling again, I'd be interested. And she got back to me and she said, you know what, I think we might be able to make this work. And as we looked into it, one of the things we really wanted to be in Canton, because we felt like, that was the one place that we could make an event that was a really special student athlete experience for everybody participating in it. And as we looked at the details of the Hall of Fame Stadium and everything with that, it just made more sense. Why don't we bring in 2 more conferences and let's play 2 games and just make it a real festival type of event. So for the first year, I think we're thrilled with how it went. We had 2 really competitive football games. I think that, we had no idea what to expect from the crowd, and despite, some cold weather, I think we were generally pleased with that. But mostly we took something from a kind of a standing start and built something new that I think the people who participated in felt like, wow, this is really special. I mean, I heard that from several of the Westminster kids. I'm sure the other commissioners will say the same. And we're excited for year 2 coming up. We think it's going to be a great annual event in D3 bowl game, amongst other many great bowl games in D3.
Well, I think we were all very happy, and I think we made our feelings known about it on social media at the time. And frankly, before it was announced, it's like, we need to expand this concept that has taken hold on the Eastern Seaboard and expand it to the West and make sure that other conferences get an opportunity to do this sort of thing. And, it continued with the folks in Wisconsin and Illinois. And then, you guys were already participating in postseason bowls, but now we bring the Ohio schools and the NCAC and the Heartland into the mix. And now there's, hopefully an opportunity for some of the other conferences that are not yet linked up with these sorts of postseason opportunities to add those for their student athletes as well. If you had advice to share with other commissioners, which I'm sure you have already behind closed doors, but publicly to share, or things that maybe fans need to understand about how these things are put together, what the challenges are, and that sort of thing. Obviously, you mentioned, I think, funding and finding a location, but what else should people be aware of?
Well, I think at the first and foremost for anything, when we contemplate something like this, is you're thinking about, one, is it sustainable? Or is this just something you're going to do once and you can't continue? I'm not interested in putting a ton of time and effort into something that's a one-shot deal. The whole point of this is we need to find something that can sustain itself year after year. And then I think the second question you have to ask yourself is, what does this do for the student athlete experience? And, in Division III, that's ultimately what we're about. We were fortunate to have 3 great teams all make the NCAA playoffs, and those kids are going to have win or lose, they're never going to forget that experience the rest of their lives. Now, Westminster, our 4th place team, gets that same experience. And, play in a place where there's NFL games taking place, to tour the Hall of Fame the night before, to have dinner as a team. That's what the types of things we're looking for. And I think you made a great point. That doesn't come together overnight. And it doesn't come together easily. I mean, we took a lot of time planning that over the first year. And now, since that, we're meeting as a group monthly, just getting ready for round 2 of that this November. So, there's a lot of things in motion with that. The one thing I would say is get your local people, the local people for like convention and visitors and sports travel, get them involved. We can't say enough about how good the Visit Canton people were in opening doors for us at the Hall of Fame, in working with hotels and helping secure local sponsorships. It's the same thing with what we've found as we've done NCAA bids in Pittsburgh, working with the Sports Pittsburgh people. They are invaluable. I mean, it's really hard, given our staffing levels, to take this and just fly with it solo. Right. If you have a group like that you can come alongside with, you can do some things you couldn't do yourselves.
You mentioned the championships. Obviously, you've hosted women's basketball already. I think probably have already hosted men's volleyball, or is that's still
we've
coming?
hosted 2. We hosted men's golf in 21, right coming out of COVID at Ogleway in Wheeling, along with Bethany, one of our schools, and then we did women's basketball in 22 at Duquesne. But there are many more to come. Yep.
What I want to ask is, is there a football venue that you guys might be interested in bidding to host for the Stag Bowl in as well? As long as we're bringing championships to Pittsburgh.
I think we're open to that. I'm not sure that we have the perfect fit for that in Pittsburgh, and quite frankly, we already have such a great relationship with Canton. Case plays football with us right up the road. You've got Hiram, which is right next door to Canton now. If the opportunity presented itself, sure. But I think one of the reasons we were successful, and we've got 5 national championships we're going to be hosting between 26 and 28. Yeah. One, the four of them are going to be at Duquesne at their arena. And Pat, you've been there. I just think it sets up really, really well for a D3 national championship, for whether it's basketball or volleyball. St. Vincent has hosted 2 women's volleyball national championships there, so you might be thinking of that. It has all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a D1, but it's at a size that doesn't feel like you're in a cavern when you're in there.
Right.
The other thing I would say about hosting in Pittsburgh, and I would add too, we're going to be hosting soccer at the Pittsburgh Riverhound Stadium right down on the river, which is I think people are going to find is a fantastic facility the year we host that. But the other thing I would say about Pittsburgh is I think if you did a scatter plot of where everyone is in Division III, we're about the center point. We really are. When you're talking 500, about the 500-mile rule.
Right.
When you're talking about pulling people in 500-mile rule from New York City to Chicago, that's attractive to the NCAA. That's a lot of flights they don't have to pay for, quite frankly. So, so I think it's been a number of things. We've had great partners. We've got great facilities. I think we're in the sweet spot. And, I think after a while, just when you have success with this, it breeds confidence, and, you start to look for new and better opportunities to do great events like this.
I'm looking ahead to 2027 for men's basketball, and having been in that arena, I would be a little concerned about, the fan base for men's basketball might outsize that arena pretty quickly. Every time, of course, the men's basketball championship is super dependent on the geography of the teams that qualify. And frankly, not every team, not every program brings a whole boatload of people. But you saw, for example, a couple years ago, Hope brought a bunch of people for women's basketball. And when they were in Salem for men's basketball, which is a long time ago, but I think a lot of those people are still alive, they brought a bunch of people to Salem for that. The folks like Platteville folks always travel. Illinois Wesleyan folks always travel. If you would get the wrong/right number or distribution of programs in that event, I'm a little worried about how it fits, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the women's basketball, which is kind of the template we're working off of, it ended up being Hope and Whitewater in the championship, and they both traveled pretty well.
It worked well, yeah.
And I mean, the whole lower bowl was pretty much full, and that's what we're hoping for with something like that. The key is you don't want to hold a national championship in a place and have the kids feel like it's empty, and are some schools going to travel more than most? Yeah, I mean, of course that's the case, but what I think we see with that is, we are central enough. I don't think it discourages people from traveling. I think everybody feels like if you're again, given that range I mentioned before, we can drive to Pittsburgh. We can get there. And the nice thing is there's enough hotels, there's enough things to do. And quite frankly, from a cost standpoint, I think Pittsburgh's pretty reasonable as far as cities go. So, I mean, all in all, it works together. It makes us pretty attractive as a championship host, I think.
I will send you the invoice for my last 2 hotels in Pittsburgh, and we can have a conversation about how
you would dispute that, huh? Okay.
Well, it depends on whether the Steelers are playing, frankly.
Well, you know what? That's a great point. Yeah. And that's one of those things that when you bid for something like this, you don't know the answer to those things. So, whether it's a Steeler weekend or not makes a big, big difference in the hotel costs. I'll concede that point.
Lots of talk in the Division III space lately about how the brand is visible on video. How about we put it that way? Sure. You guys have a great digital network that, frankly, the PAC digital network kind of preceded maybe all of the rest. I think the president's
we were one of the early ones, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Like one of the first ones to really band it all together, try to compile it all, whether it's even on one platform in terms of where the streams live, but very much so on your website and how it was branded. And I feel like you guys have been doing that and been doing it well for a number of years and across multiple platforms as things have evolved. And of course, now we're in the situation where another handful of Division III conferences have gone to a behind a paywall, and the fan outcry is loud when that first happens, and then it kind of peters out because people get tired of all the outrage. From your guys' perspective as a conference that has had at least, I think, branding success, bringing it all under a roof, how do those situations look to you? Like the possibility of bringing the PAC behind a paywall and taking the payout that comes with that, has that been discussed? Is that something? Does the PAC have a stance on that as to where they stand right now?
Sure. Of course we've discussed it. I will say, and I've learned in this, I've been in this role long enough to never say never on anything.
Sure.
But I don't see that in our near future, going behind a payroll wall. And I say that respectfully in that I don't begrudge any conference making the decisions they need to make, especially given the situation in higher ed in general. Looking for revenue and things like that, and the financial pressures that schools and conferences are under. The schools that have made this decision, or the conferences that have made this decision, are doing so because they feel this is in their best interests, and
sure,
they should do that if that's what they believe. I think to a couple of points to that. One, I think you mentioned we were an early adopter of the digital network concept, and I really I think the one area we were a little ahead of the curve is I really could see the trend moving from kind of the bundled cable to the OTT platforms, your Roku, your Apple TV. And so we really wanted to get on the front edge of that wave, if that makes sense. And I think we did largely. So yeah, I think we're established. I'm hopeful this year. I can't say 100%, but I think all of our core members are going to be on the digital network this year. We've had 2 that were not. One of them joined mid-year last year, so there's really only one kind of hanging out there, and I'm pretty sure they're going to get on board as well. But I would add a second point to that. The other area I think we really have something unique in Division III is the group. I know you're familiar with them, but others may not be, and that's what we call the PAC Sports Network, which is an independent video production group that's led by an alumnus of one of our schools. He came to me, maybe 12, 13 years ago and said, I have this concept, I want to do this. And so we kind of started very bare bones, and he's built this over a decade into what I think is just a fabulous, fabulous platform for us. I mean, a PAC basketball doubleheader of the week. Yeah. They cover all of our team championships. They're for every pitch of the softball and baseball tournaments. I think they give us a platform that very few other Division III conferences have. And so that's got to weigh into the equation as well. You've spent this time building this. And again, I come out of the sports information world, the promotion world, the marketing and brand world. I see the value that has had for us. Not just in recruitment and retention of athletes, which of course is the key point, but also just as far as brand perception, and not even necessarily Western PA, but nationally. So I mean, for us to give that up would take, we would have to really be overwhelmed. Let's put it that way, to move away from that, because we feel that has been so integral to a lot of the growth and the success that we've had over the past decade or two.
Speaking as someone who is always on the lookout for people who are willing to do labors of love, which I suspect is part of what you're talking about, how do other conferences and or national media platforms find those people? Because you really need one of those, some dedicated person who has a passion for doing it. And I understand full well what that feels like, but don't often have the opportunity to find other people who are able to do that and help supplement what we do. How about that? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And again, I can't take much credit for the sports network. I mean, Randy Gore and his crew, Randy came to me with the concept, and all I did was say, I give my blessing, and I'm going to try to help you in every way I can. But he puts the productions together. He goes out and sells the advertising. And one of the things that's really made this work, Pat, is that we are very synergistic, and that he's not coming to me saying, I want to do this. And if I tell him, hey, here's why I think that's a bad idea, we don't battle like that. Everything we do is kind of in lockstep. And that's a credit to him, because, there's times, I have to say to somebody, no, we can't do this, and here's the reason why. I have never once had any issue with him, kind of not having the ship sailing the same direction, if that makes sense. So we're very fortunate in that way. And I know that's not going to be the case. Not every conference is going to have an opportunity like that, but it comes back to your initial thing, the equation of whether or not to go behind the paywall, the cost benefit analysis. That's a big part of it for us. And again, that's something I think that's really unique to the PAC as opposed to other D3 conferences.
I hear everybody talk about, we know the benefits are financial, right? And we know that, what it does is it takes away generally the ability of the casual fan to pop in on a game, or a fan of, who follows Division III as a whole, and might be drawn to a game where, it's in the red zone with 2.5 minutes to go in a tie game, or, you've got an opportunity for a buzzer beater, or, the big conference game is going to the bottom of the 7th or the bottom of the 9th. Those are the people who no longer get an easy opportunity to come view those games. Is that exposure something that you feel is valuable? And maybe I'm leaning on you as your with your former sports information hat on there as well.
Well, I think yes, and I think it speaks to the fact that, and you probably know this as well as anyone, we're just in a very different place than we were 20 years ago with
Yeah.
these kind of things. There is a national network.
Right.
I'll bet in 2005, you could probably talk to people in our conference. They couldn't name 5 other D3 conferences. Now they not only can name all 40 plus, but what regions they're in and who's the strength. I mean, it's just it's gone from a very localized to a very
Right.
regional to a very national perspective. And I think as part of that, yeah, I mean, you want your brand to be as known and as positive as possible, because that trickles down to you in a number of ways. In addition to the obvious ones, it's part of the reason why we're so willing to host national championships. That's part of the PAC brand. We really want to be perceived as one of the really elite conferences in Division III. And elite can mean a lot of things, but what I mean by that is this is a conference that always has the student athlete experience first. We try to do everything we do in a first class and professional manner. We don't use the excuse that, well, we're only D3. There's no reason we can't be as professional and do things as well as higher levels, despite the fact that we may not have the budgets they do. So all those things work together to that, because I think in time, Pat, people want to be associated with an organization like that, and I think we've seen that. I think one of the things we've been fortunate with the membership additions, they've all come to us. Every one of them has initiated those conversations, and there are different reasons for that. Some, it's financial, it's geographic, it's academic. There are a lot of things that go into why schools choose where they go.
Right.
But I think at least part of it is they feel like, the PAC does things the right way. And, we get it perfect all the time? Absolutely not. But we really strive to never make the excuse of, we can't do this because we're D3. We want to make the big time right where we are. We want this to be a special thing for our athletes, especially to feel like being a PAC athlete is a big deal. And do everything we do is kind of geared towards promoting a culture and environment where that's possible. And that kind of shows itself in a number of different fronts, but I think there's an overall vision that goes with that, if that makes sense.
Always grateful for a good Frosty Westering reference, so thank you for dropping that in there. You guys, as a conference, have grown pretty big, and in a lot of cases, conferences are trying to grow or maintain size because we all see what is coming in terms of demographics, right? There are going to be, simply put, fewer college-age students as the years go on, and that the so-called enrollment cliff is coming pretty quickly. I would assume that that's one of the things that keeps a conference commissioner up at night. And I was wondering if maybe there are other things, or if you want to talk to also about how you guys might be guarding against potential schools closing or merging or being acquired, all of the kind of ways that Division III athletics programs go away.
I've told several people, I've said this in several councils, one of the great ironies of today is that I feel like the PAC as a conference has never been stronger. And at the same time, our member institutions have never been under such pressure and stress and threat as what they are. I think what we try to do then is to provide as much support to our campuses as we can. And, obviously part of that's financial, but part of that is things like I said before, cost containment is ways of saying, we're going to be good stewards with your membership money. We're going to set things up in a way to be as prudent as we can be, but at the same time, if we see opportunities that we feel are going to add value, we want to do that too. It's really hard, the demographic cliff, because quite frankly, the Midwest is going to get it worse than anybody. And,
Right.
Especially, our area, if you look at the population of Western Pennsylvania, we're looking at significant declines over the next 20 years. That's just the reality we have to deal with. Now, what I would say to that is I think that athletics is part of the answer for our schools. If you go back 20, 25 years, you could take a school in the PAC and take a map and draw about 100-mile radius around their campus. And I'll bet 90% of their students came from that radius.
Sure.
Pat, that's not the case anymore.
Right.
And why do our schools, 10 plus years ago begin to add men's and women's lacrosse? because now they can recruit more nationally. So, when you don't have the population local, you've got to find a way to bring population in. And I do think one of the selling points we have, and we not just with the championships, but just in general, is Pittsburgh is considered an incredibly livable city. That this is, one part of our messaging is come and play in the PAC, graduate, stay, and be a part of what we believe is a fantastic culture. Because quite frankly, there's opportunity here. And I think the demographic shifts are a big part of that opportunity.
I want to ask about livable for a second.
Yeah.
Besides Primanti's, what should I have when I'm in town next? So I was there when I was there last October. Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you, as a 50-something male. I was going into I was kind of through in the middle of the process that you have to do before you do the colonoscopy thing. So I did not have,
I've been there with brother.
I know, right? I did not have the full Primanti's experience. I may go back there, but what else should I do? What's the best thing I should do?
I'd tell you about Pittsburgh pizza, but you could ask 10 different people what they think Pittsburgh pizza is, and you're going to get 10 different answers.
All right.
I mean, one of the things you'll hear about is Beddoes pizza, which kind of has what we call the Ohio Valley. I don't know if you've heard of this, where they bake the pizza and then they put the cheese on frozen, after the pizza is cooked. That's a big thing, but some people hate that. If you're in Pittsburgh, there's the big battle between Minio's and Aiello's in Squirrel Hill, which is right by our Chatham campus. Okay. They're 3 doors apart, and and you swear you're one or the other. So
all right.
So I think you have, obviously you've mentioned Primanti's and their role in it. I think Pittsburgh is really, if you've never been there, it has some real hidden gems. I recommend people all the time, if you're coming to Pittsburgh, spend a Saturday morning in what we call the Strip District, which is just like a local open air market that's just down from downtown. Every kind of ethnic food you can imagine. That's where half the city gets their Steeler knockoff gear at half the price of what the official stuff is. I mean, things like that. I mean, it's just, if you really want to kind of breathe in Pittsburgh culture, Western PA culture in the morning, that's where I would recommend people to go. It's really hard to replicate anyplace else.
Are those stores that are right near Primanti's? And now
The original Primanti's is in the Strip District. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
Primanti's has kind of franchised, and they're all over the region now. But if you're going to the original, all the Strip District is within walking distance of that. Mm-hmm.
But I assume I have to go to the original. That's what I did last time. So I'll be doing that again.
But if you do that, don't tell them to take the coleslaw off your sandwich, or they'll judge you. So.
No, that's the whole point of going, isn't it? Isn't it?
You can do that at the franchise ones, and they won't say a thing. But if you go to the original and you tell them you don't want the coleslaw on the sandwich, you're going to get judged without a doubt.
And as you might expect, that was that was a part of the sandwich that I had to not partake of because of the special dietary restrictions I was under at the time.
We won't go any more specific than that. Exactly. Right.
You will, if you're out there and you don't know, you will learn at some point. Yeah. One last question. You guys, of course, are you're getting a former D1 school coming in. It seems like that's not going to be the only one to make the D1 to D3 change. And you talked about some things that kind of led me back to this part of the conversation is kind of give the pitch for why Division III is a better place to be than, not to rag on the Northeast Conference, but just to pick one because that's where St. Francis is coming from.
I mean, I'm a product of the Northeast Conference. I went to school at Robert Morris when they were in there, and I told the folks at St. Francis, the 4 years I was in college from 88 to 92, Robert Morris won the NEC 3 of those years. The only year they didn't, St. Francis won in 1991. So, I mean, I've been on both sides of this wall, so to speak. I would just speak to some of the things that the St. Francis folks told me. I was contacted by basically by a consultant in the fall that kind of got this ball rolling.
Okay.
And I asked the question, why us? He's like, well, they've taken a lot of time to look at their options in D2 and D3 and this conference and that conference. And they said what it really came down to was culture fit. When all the changes have happened in Division I, they started to ask themselves some fundamental questions. Is this what we want our money, that we have committed to building an athletic department? Is this how we want it to be spent? Is this who we want to be? And I think Father Malachi, the president there, said it best. He's like, we didn't leave Division One. We if the old Division One was still there, we'd still be there. They've left us, basically. Yeah. And so it's my heart breaks for them in one way, because I know ideally they felt like they had a very special niche in that culture. And unfortunately, the things that have happened over especially the last 5 years, have just made it untenable for a school like St. Francis. I was gratified to hear them seek us out, because they felt like we were a cultural match. Like they felt like they're of any place they could go. They felt like the student athletes they're going to have as they transition out are going to have the best experience playing in the PAC against schools that are like them, basically. And it's funny is if you look at their demographics, they're not that dissimilar, as far as number of students and things like that to what an average PAC campus is. So while that transition's hard, and you've mentioned we've gone through it with several NAIA schools making the transition about 15 years ago. It's not undoable, and I think they're going to come out of it feeling like they're a stronger institution at the end, and just with an athletic program that's still very good, but with a different focus.
It's Joe Onderko, the commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. I really appreciate you sitting down. I didn't know if we were going to have a 40-minute conversation when this started, but frankly, I think it's a good number of topics we covered, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Pat. Good to talk to you. Take care.